Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me again for another episode. I know. It's been a minute. Again, it's been a minute. Now listen, I am trying, but I got to be honest with you guys. Juggling a full-time job and being a first-time parent to a baby girl is really not easy. I'm trying. I'm trying. I barely get any sleep, but you know what? As I said in my previous video, I will always come back with a new video for you guys. Now, I may not be as weekly consistent as I used to be back in the day, but trust me, the videos will keep on coming. So please do be patient with me. I am trying the best I can. Now, if you are new to this channel, hello and welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to watch a true crime episode with me, Prince. And if you are a fan of true crime and you want to keep hearing more about these cases from all over the world, then I highly suggest that you subscribe to the channel and you stick around and you share the videos with your friends and family so they can also be aware of the kind of things that we deal with in this world today. Right, so today we are going to talk about a very disturbing case. I have to be honest with you guys. This one is it's brutal. It's a very brutal case, and the way this person lost her life is simply just one of the most heartbreaking things you could ever imagine. Now, I've covered a lot of messed up cases on my channel, but I have to say this is definitely up there with the lot of them. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the horrific murder of Sonia Schwarz. This is a South African case that took place in the 1990s. So let's go back in time a little bit and talk about it. No matter how old the case is, that does not diminish its importance. People have to know the story of Sonia Schwarz. So before she was Sonia Schwarz, she was Sonia Louise. And Sonia Louise was born on June 8th in 1966. And even though there isn't a lot of information about her childhood or upbringing, it is said that she was quite close with her family because she grew up in a loving home. And it is said that as soon as Sonia was done with high school, she then decided to join the police academy with the hopes and dreams of becoming a police officer. And while at the academy, this is where she would eventually meet the man that she would end up marrying. And this man is named Dave Schwartz. So since he's known as Dave, throughout the case, I will be referring to him as Dave. Now, unlike Sonia, Dave unfortunately did not have the best childhood that a child actually deserves. He grew up in a very poor family in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa in a place known as East London. And according to Dave, his family was so poor that they couldn't even afford to have a fridge. And oftentimes he said that he and his siblings would go to bed hungry. They would live on empty stomachs because there just wasn't enough to go around. Now, on top of this terrible ordeal that Dave and his siblings had to deal with, they also had to deal with living with an alcoholic father. It is said that their father was drinking so badly, so often, that he would often leave the family to go out and do some binge drinking. And on top of that, while he's doing this binge drinking, his mother, Dave's mother, also believed that perhaps if she also got into drinking with her husband, he would stop leaving the family so much to go out and drink. Now, obviously, this idea never worked because she just could not keep up with her husband's drinking, and she would often pass out before he could even go anywhere. And so whenever she would black out, he would just leave, go out, and keep on drinking some more. So you can tell that Dave and his siblings really did not grow up in the best kind of environment. So then at the age of 16, Dave had finally had enough. When he looked at the situation that he and his siblings had to deal with on a daily basis, he decided that it was time to report his parents to the South African Department of Welfare. And this is when he and his siblings were taken and they were put into the foster care system and the state care system. And even though Dave believed that at the time this was the best thing to do for him and his siblings, it is said that unfortunately his younger sister, when she was put into the foster care system, she did not have the best experience at all. And we all know that it's not very often where kids get to have the best experience when it comes to being taken care of by the state or by foster families. And even though there isn't a lot of information as to exactly what happened, unfortunately at the age of 18, Dave's younger sister ended up taking her own life. Dave himself believes that the traumatic experience that she could have went through in the system could have led to her taking her own life at only the age of 16. So you can sum up exactly just how much of a hell she must have went through in that time. And as for Dave himself, he also didn't really pay much attention to how this experience, his childhood experience, also deeply affected him as well. And even while he was at the academy training to be a police officer, he did not seek any help for this. But also keep in mind, guys, Dave was in training back in the 1970s, a period of time where men were not allowed to talk freely about how they feel or about their traumas. And even though at the academy site there were some psychologists, it was heavily criticized for a man to be sitting and talking about his feelings, about his mental problems with a mental health care professional. So Dave didn't really seek much help about his traumatic experience from his childhood. Now, even though Dave obviously had some childhood traumas that he had to deal with, that he kept bottled up inside, he was still very well intent on becoming a very successful man in his life. He was one of the hardest working officers at the academy, so much so that he intended on climbing up the ladder and becoming one of the most respected officers in the force. But now, even though Dave worked hard, this didn't mean that he didn't have a social life. And according to himself, he did say that he had quite the social life whenever he got the chance. So every time he played hard as much as he liked to work hard. Then in 1988, this is when Dave came across a beautiful young recruit by the name of Sonia Louise. And this is when Dave knew that it was time to settle down and start a family. And as soon as they met, even Sonia also felt the same way, that this was the man she wanted to be with. And within just 6 months of being together, Sonia and Dave decided to finally tie the knot, despite the many objections of Sonia's parents. Sonia graduated from the academy, but in 1990 she had to put a pause on her dreams and ambitions and focus on becoming a mother, because this is when she became pregnant and they welcomed their first child into the world. And their firstborn was a beautiful, beautiful baby boy. But then also in 1991, they then welcomed their second child, but this time it was a beautiful baby girl. But as we all know, taking care of babies, especially not one but two, is no small feat. And so because of this, Sonia ended up unfortunately falling into some postnatal depression, and this took a heavy toll on her. But she did start receiving treatment. And according to Dave, seeing his wife go through this was the very first time in his life he started taking mental health into consideration. Now, even though Dave claimed not to know much about negative or abnormal behavior before he started taking mental health into consideration or paying attention to it, his marriage to Sonia wasn't all that grand. And this is even from the very beginning. Now, according to my research, it is said that Dave displayed what is called controlling and obsessive behavior right from the onset of their marriage, and this caused a lot of issues between him and his wife. One example of his controlling and obsessive behavior was the fact that Sonia was not allowed to watch any television if Dave was not around. And the reason for this was because apparently Dave wanted to be the one who interprets every single part of whatever show they were watching together to Sonia. Why he wanted to do this, we have no idea. And also it was said that Dave was quite the jealous guy. And this was evident when Sonia actually wanted to go study a course in Cape Town that would actually help her advance in her career as a police officer. So as soon as Dave learned about this made it worse. Now, at first, Dave definitely didn't want to let her go to Cape Town to study this course, but eventually he decided to agree to it. But of course, his agreement to it came with some heavy conditions. And one of those conditions being the fact that Sonia was not allowed to go out at night. She was also not allowed to speak to other men if it's not related to their schoolwork. And also she had to call him every day during certain times. And every weekend she had to be back home with him. And this continued all the way till 1997 until Dave finally decided to go see a psychologist. And it was at this time that Dave was diagnosed with depression and PTSD. But it wasn't really made clear if the PTSD came from his traumatic childhood, his horrible childhood, or if it came from working as a police officer, because we all know that even working as a police officer can have a heavy toll mentally on anyone. But the psychologist definitely recommended that Dave should stop working as a police officer. So it was recommended that Dave should resign from his job. But you and I both know at this point just how much this job meant to him. He had dreams, he had ambitions for this job. He wanted to climb up the ranks. So obviously, even though he was instructed to quit the job for his own sake, for his own mental health care, Dave had no intention of leaving this job because he still wanted to go to the rank of being general one day. And throughout 1997, things were still not so good in the Schwarz home. And according to Dave, he then started suspecting that Sonia was cheating on him. And the reason he started suspecting this was because he says that there would be nights where he and Sonia would be watching television together while drinking some wine, but for some reason he would always find himself passing out with little to no recollection of what happened the previous night. When he decided to investigate this, Dave said that he found some tablets that he had no idea of in Sonia's bag, and he believes that these were sedatives that she was using to drug him so that she can go out and see whoever it is that she was seeing at the time. Then Dave said as he continued investigating this matter, thinking that Sonia is cheating on him, he decided to go get phone records of his landline. And as he looked into them, he said that he believes that several phone calls were made to his home, and they were made during the nights when he was passed out. So this really deepened his suspicions that Sonia was seeing someone else besides him. Dave also said that there were a few phone calls that were made from his home to one specific number, and he had no idea who this number belonged to. So he ended up getting one of his colleagues to help him out by following Sonia to see what she gets up to. They also even decided to bug the telephone in the house so they can actually listen in on any conversation that Sonia would have on the phone. Dave also said that there was an instance when Sonia was speaking on the phone and she actually tried to lower her voice, telling the person on the other side to meet up with her at their special place. So by now you can tell that Dave really believed that Sonia was cheating on him at this time. Now Sonia, on the other hand, started expressing her fear of being with David. It is said that she started confiding in her boss about how she fears that Dave's mental health is actually spiraling out of control, so much so that she thinks that one of these days he is going to kill her. And Dave himself even also admitted that at one point he had lost his patience with Sonia and he had put his hands on her. But whether or not this was the first time this happened between them, we don't really know that for sure. So I will leave that to you guys to decide. And one day, Sonia requested a 1 day's leave from her boss because she said that Dave was getting out of control so much that they had to book him into a psychiatric facility for his and everyone else's protection. Then on December 19th in 1997, even their son, their 7-year-old son, started speaking about how it felt like the energy in the house was quite different. So you can imagine just how bad things must have been for a 7-year-old to start noticing problems in the family. Dave also explained that on this day, he also called a family meeting with some of his relatives so they can try to help him draw a conclusion as to whether or not Sonia has been unfaithful to him. And so he played them the recordings of the phone calls that she had with whoever this person was. And they could all agree that they could hear her telling the person on the other side to meet up with her at their special place. However, as soon as Sonia became part of this meeting as well, for some reason, Dave's family members decided to change their minds, and now they no longer believed that she was cheating on him, so he was the only one left believing this idea. But also, this wasn't the only reason Dave's family members came through that day. They also came through with the intention of booking him into a mental health care facility because, like I said earlier on, Sonia was concerned about his mental health and the fact that he was spiraling out of control. So obviously on this day, things were not going as Dave planned. He thought that he would have his family on his side and they would finally get the truth out of Sonia. So as they revealed this intention to him as well, He then decided that he had no other choice but to pack up his stuff, get ready so he can be booked into this mental health care facility. And as this was happening, he then made a request to his family members for them to go withdraw some money for him at the ATM so that he can at least have some cash with him when he's at the facility. And they saw no problem with this, so they agreed to do it. Now, this next part that I'm about to get to is going to be very dark. And this series of events is according to their 7-year-old son. According to Dave's son, he said that on that day, on October 19th, he and his sister were just sitting in the lounge together when they heard a terrible scream coming from their mother. And as soon as these kids went to go investigate and see what's happening to their mother, this is when they found their own father hacking their mother with an axe to death. I cannot even imagine what was going through their minds seeing something like that. That is obviously something that you would only expect to see in a horror movie, but they were actually seeing it with their own eyes. This horrific action being done by their father to their own mother. Now, Dave's son said that he tried to jump in at this time and try to get his father off of his mother to save her life. But do keep in mind, he was only a 7-year-old boy at this time. So he obviously he didn't have enough strength to match up to his father. And so Dave could easily push him aside and continue his assault on Sonia. And it is said that Sonia tried to protect herself with some curtains as Dave was continuously assaulting her with this axe. But this did nothing to stop him, and even during the autopsy, fragments of the curtains were found in some of her wounds. So that was according to their son, right? So the next part that I'm going to talk about is according to Dave himself. So Dave said that on that day, Sonia was sitting in the bedroom, and as soon as he walked in, she just looked at him and she confessed that indeed she was cheating on him and she wanted to talk about it with him. And as soon as Dave heard this, he said that he only saw red. And after that, he doesn't really remember much of what happened until he felt his son tugging at his leg, trying to get him to stop hacking his wife with this axe. And when he finally came to, that's when he saw his wife, Sonia, just lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. And after realizing what he had done, Dave said that he took the kids, put them in the car, and he drove to the police station to hand himself over for what he had done. Now, at this point, obviously, Sonia was no longer alive. It is said that she had suffered too many hits to her neck and her head, so there was no chance of her surviving an attack like this. And when Dave's family members came back from getting him the cash that he requested, or that he needed, they were obviously shocked to see the police surrounding the house outside because they had no idea what had happened inside. The police also called Sonia's boss to try to help them identify Sonia's body, and he agreed to come through and do this, but he definitely was not ready for the kind of scene that was waiting for him at that house. And as soon as the police informed him as to who the killer was, he also told them that Sonia always had a feeling that something like this would happen to her, because at this point she was terrified of Dave and always had a feeling that he was going to do something horrible to her. Their kids were taken to go spend the night at Sonia's boss's place, and of course these kids were traumatized by what they had seen that day. Then on the next day they were taken by their grandparents to go stay with them. Dave Schwarz was arrested as well the following day, and he was charged with murder and assault. But he kept on telling the police that he had no idea what happened because he must have lost control. He blacked out and lost control. But according to his sister-in-law, this wasn't true because he told her that he knew exactly what he was doing. His sister-in-law said that Dave also told her that he stabbed her as well before he killed her with the axe. And he said that he only killed her out of love, which is such a twisted thing to say, because how can that be an act of love? Dave was sent for a psychiatric evaluation, and so he pleaded not guilty due to reasons of insanity, but it is said that later on he wanted to change his plea to guilty, but he was still claiming that he had no control over his actions on that day. Dave said that as soon as Sonia confessed to cheating on him, this must have triggered his PTSD, and it caused him to be disassociated and lose control. And for this reason, he deeply believed that he deserved a well-reduced sentence because he was not in his right state of mind. However, the prosecution obviously argued against this. The prosecution believed that this murder was well premeditated. And the one reason that made them believe this without a shadow of a doubt was the fact that Dave made sure to get his aunt and his uncle out of the house to go withdraw this cash for him that he didn't really need, just to make sure that no one in the house was there to stop him from killing his wife. Because obviously he knew that his kids would be powerless against him. So if you really look into that fact, it doesn't really seem like he had no idea what he was doing. But again, I want to hear what you guys think about that part down in the comments. The judge ended up accepting Dave's guilty plea, so this gave the prosecution some hope that they would get a justified sentence for the horrific, undeserved murder of Sonia Schwarz. But they were disappointed to find out that the judge would only sentence Dave to only 5 years in prison. 5 years in prison for taking the life of his wife, the mother of his kids, in the most horrific way possible. He only got 5 years. But wait, there is more. The prosecution tried to appeal the sentence, but to no avail. And Dave was even quoted saying, and I quote, "We heard the great news. We had won and my sentence remained the same." So I don't know about you guys, but this doesn't sound like someone who was remorseful of murdering his wife in one of the most horrific ways possible, nor did it sound like someone who had no control over his actions that day. He sounded very happy that he was only getting a slap on the wrist for what he did. Now, if that hasn't made you angry yet, the next part that I'm about to tell you will send you flying through the roof. Out of the 5-year sentence that Dave was given to spend in prison, this man only spent 10 months in prison, and the rest of his sentence had to be carried out under correctional supervision. So you can most definitely say that this man only walked away with a slap on the wrist for taking the life of the mother of his own children in front of the children. So yes, there was no justice whatsoever for the murder of Sonia Schwarz. 5 years to begin with was nothing, and on top of that, this man only spent 10 months in prison and spent the rest of his sentence under correctional supervision. Someone like this should have received life in prison with no possibility of parole whatsoever. However, this is how the case was carried out. The kids underwent multiple mental health consultations to deal with the trauma of witnessing firsthand what happened to their mother that day. And it is said that they never had any further contact with their father, even years after this happened. However, Dave's son said that he did at some point manage to track down his father and get in contact with him, but this was not to reconcile with him or to forgive him for what he did. He said the only reason he did this was so he can look him into the eye and tell him that he was not afraid of him anymore, and he was in his 30s at this time. Dave said that he had tried to reconcile with his kids after this, and he tried to have a continued relationship with them. But of course, his son said that he was never going to let that happen, which is understandable. And it is said that Dave also ended up getting into another relationship with another woman in 2005. This was a mother of 4 kids. Now, even though he had told her of his past, her 4 kids never knew anything about what Dave did. Then in 2013, Dave went on to be hired as an investigator after he registered with the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority. And this was back in 2009 when he got registered with it. And so this allowed him to be hired by a local university until a local journalist recognized him from his name and put the pieces together as to who David really was. So you can say that Dave took the life of his wife in one of the most terrible, most brutal, most inhumane, most barbaric ways possible. And he got away with it, basically. And he got to live out his life and go on like nothing happened. He possibly traumatized his kids for the rest of their lives. They are probably never going to be the same again. They will never see their mother again. They will always think of that day. Imagine what they have to think about every time the date of October 19th comes around each year. So he scarred them for life. Yes, they underwent some mental health consultations to help deal with the trauma of that day. But can you really come back from seeing your own father hacking your mother with an axe like that to death? So he did this to them. He broke apart his family. He took the life of his wife. He took a mother away from her children, and he got away with it. He got to live on and move on with his life. Where is the justice? Where is the justice for Sonia Schwarz? But guys, that is the unfortunate, the sad story of Sonia Louise Schwarz. This woman lost her life. This woman, I am so terribly sorry. I am out of words. I don't know what to say about this. I can only hope that you guys will have something to say about this in the comments, because this is something straight out of a horror movie or a horror graphic novel or something like that. And to Sonia's kids, who unfortunately had to lose their mother in such a horrific way, I am so terribly sorry for the loss that you went through. I'm so sorry that you had to experience something like this. And I can only hope that you are trying day by day to get through this, to remember your mother in the best ways possible, and to keep on living in her memory as well. But thank you guys so much for tuning in into this case. Please do let me know what you think about it in the comments. I will be looking forward to hearing your thoughts about it. And so that is all that I have for you guys for today. And as I've said in the beginning, if you are new to this channel and you want to hear more about these kind of cases, please do consider subscribing to the channel, like the video, and also share it with your friends and family so they can be aware as to what happens out there in the world. But from me to you, thank you so much for coming in for today's episode. And until next time, please do stay safe out there and take care of yourself. Goodbye.